Hi, Kathy.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Where are you joining me from today?
I'm in Reno, Nevada. I live outside the city. I live in the foothill of the Sierra. So when I look out my window, I can see a ski resort. And right on the other side of that ski resort is Lake Tahoe.
Beautiful.
I just got back from hiking. So I live near hiking trails. And this is part of where I live, is part of what keeps me like balanced
Sane.
and calm in my head. Because what I do is controversial and I don't invite disagreement, but I sure do get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's certainly a sensitive topic for many, and I can't wait to dive in because this is actually something that's been on my radar for quite a long time, which is generally across categories how religion and specifically religious text has shaped our current lives, how we live amongst each other, how we feel about certain things and certain people and lifestyles and etc. For the purposes of this podcast, very specifically as it relates to how we treat women, right? And that's something that's also on your radar, obviously. But this conversation is going to have more of an LGBTQ and woman kind of narrative to it, which I'm super interested in delving into with you. But we have to kind of go back in time for a moment because you were raised Roman Catholic. You were quite religious growing up, and ultimately took a 15-year hiatus from organized religion. Why?
Because of how my mother was treated, actually. When I was 2 years old, my father walked out on my mother. I have two older brothers, 2, 4, and 6. And my father walked out. He was already having an affair. And I lived in an Irish Catholic community in Upper Manhattan in Inwood. And it was always known as an Irish, well, now it's a different mixture, but at the time it was very Irish Catholic. About 40% of the kids I went to school with spoke with brogues because their parents spoke with very heavy brogues. So here's my mother being left. I was the only kid in my girls' Catholic grammar school without a father. So I was born in 56, I'm 66. And so it was incredibly stigmatized at the time. And so I grew up trying to hide this very shaming thing about me. I would constantly lie that I had a father. And this was by no fault of my mother's, right? He was adulterous. He left her. I think she did a darn good job in raising 3 responsible adults. But I saw the way she was treated, and she was excommunicated. So although she could go to church, she would not be allowed to receive communion. And she was very much shunned. And when it came time for me and my middle brother to go to school in the parish church, in the parish school, I mean, we're very much about you go to the parish school. You don't go to another parish's school. Well, my parish school had no room. There was no room at the inn for Kathy and John because Roberta had since been divorced and her children were somehow less than.
Yeah, it's such an interesting direct path there, although the road for you was not such a direct path, and we will talk about it. But the connection between how you were treated growing up and then and your mom and family, and then the people who you work with today, certainly there's a parallel there. But I just think, to paint the picture, what we're talking about is a community that completely is immersed in this parish, in your church, in your customs, in the community. You go to your church presumably every Sunday, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
You go to the school that is associated with that church. Your friends and your community are all associated with that church, right?
Yes.
And so it was really your entire life was blown apart because of this. And your mother, like you said, no fault of her own, she was left by your father, and that stigma and that shame was 100% placed on her, and she was punished for it. And then you were punished for it and your siblings.
And the interesting thing is that because my mother was a young woman at the time, she was probably 26 when that happened. That's young. And because the community didn't give her like support or even language to express how she was feeling, my mother would she told me stories like she would take me when I was small, because I was 2, she would take me to the park for the day and sit in the park by the Hudson River and just hang out with me so she didn't have to be walking around the neighborhood with the carriage, because she was that stigmatized. So she didn't have language to give to us because she was not settled, right? So she couldn't give us the language to explain like why we were carrying these burdens. So I don't blame her at all for these things. She was doing the best she could with the tool belt she had, but it ended up being a mess. It really was a mess.
And subsequently, you were excommunicated from the church. And then when did you come back to organized religion?
I got married when I was almost 30, and I married a man that was married before. And I had always had this kind of a spiritual tugging at me. I remember very specific times in college it happening. And I always thought there were 2 things I just wanted to do that I was not doing. I wanted to, very odd extremes, I wanted to find somebody that would go to dance lessons with me and church. Now that's odd, right? That's very odd. But that's what I wanted. And so when I got married, I knew, and I did take dance lessons with him, but I knew that this was a direction I wanted to go in, especially because I knew I wanted to be a mother. So, you hear, you think, you believe that children should be raised in a home with some kind of spiritual bent to it. And I wanted that. I wanted that sense of spirituality and community that I thought church might offer. So less than a year into the marriage, we were already having problems. We're having problems with communication. We're having problems with leadership. Evangelical Christianity is big on this one, like the male gets to lead. And so I thought, maybe if we take this direction, maybe there's some answers there that will keep us together, because the other part that's operating in my head is I don't want to be divorced. I mean, I know what that looks like. I've seen that happen to my mother. I'm going to do whatever it takes, use whatever avenues I need to go down to have a successful marriage. And we had some very close friends at the time that told us that Christianity could be one of those roads. And so we tried it out.
In what way? In terms of therapy through your church or community? What is it? What is it? Just that you'd show up and then God will bring you together? Like what?
It's that magical. No, it would be more about that we had to get settled in who we were, and how could it sounds crazy now, but how could I possibly know who I am without a greater being telling me who I am, right? So I'm constantly going down this path that I want to go down, where I should be going down this path of who I was created to be. So, I mean, there's some validity in this. There's a lot of validity in, healing, and obviously coming from my youth, I needed some of that. So, but I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to have a successful marriage. So we started going to church, and within a couple of months, we each had a religious experience, and it put our marriage on a different track. And it actually did bring it back together to a more peaceful spot for some period of time.
What was that religious experience for you?
For me to be able to say, maybe I don't know everything, and that there's something bigger than me that maybe I should lean into, and I'm willing to give that a chance, and leaning into it rather than striving all the time to listen to a higher power. And it really did change my life.